All right, let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to go over, so we went over shapes the last time, and I also wanted to go over shape building. And this is also your aligns as well as your transforms. And I do not have that up right now. All I've done is I've went ahead and I've made a new document. And so let's go ahead into Window. And let's get our Pathfinder. And when that Pathfinder comes up, you're going to see it comes with the aligns also. So just in case I didn't cover those, let's go for it. I'm going to make a couple of weird boxes here on my screen that are different sizes so that you can see each of them and how they interact with each other. So what this is useful for, let's say you're doing either a poster or a real estate ad and everything has to be completely in alignment and then that has to go down the line, sort of like the grid style. I'm going to click and drag over all of them if I want to select it that way, or I hold down my shift key while being in that regular selection so that I have everything selected. So click drag, or just go ahead and do shift and you can get it one by one. That's going to depend totally on your work preferences with this. So under our align menu, you can see we have horizontal align left, horizontal align center, and horizontal align right. So this is just going to depend on your object. So left is going to take everything and it's going to put it all over this left axis. And I'm going to undo that so then we can go to the next one. And then our horizontal is going to take the midpoints and it's going to line them all up. And then our right is going to take everything and push it to a full right alignment of whatever it is that we have selected. So right, center, left. And then, of course, since we're in our regular selection, we can move this wherever we want. The opposite direction, what happens if we want to get all of our verticals top, center, bottom? All right, go ahead, top, center, bottom. So this is a really nice way to be able to get, especially for those of us who are really into gridding, which you may end up becoming a gridnik in the design world, and you want everything to be sort of perfectly aligned and perfectly spaced. So the spacing is where these distributes come in handy. I'm just going to grab the same object and duplicate it. And I'm just going to bloop, 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 so that we can see that this is not even, this is not aligned, but I want all four of those boxes. I want it to start with this box and end with this box, and these two need to sort of fall into place. I'm going to switch to my regular select. Shift key, all of those. Now for something like this, it doesn't matter if you go top, it doesn't matter if you go center, and it doesn't matter if you go bottom. It's going to just depend, you know, how you wish to arrange this. First step, though, to get everything even, let's get that alignment in. So do your alignment, whether it be vertical or if you're doing the horizontals. And then we have all of these distributes. So we could distribute to the left. You can see it shifts everything in. And this is going to basically do about the same thing, just a heads up, because these are all the same box shapes. So you might want to experiment with that. Then center, and then right, which you're not going to see anything since I didn't do an undo. What's nice with this is just, this is saying, hey, these two, so it's this one and this one, are our endpoints. These are now perfectly mathed for us. And I don't know about you, but I like when it does the math for me. And now, let's say I want to make this an even sort of checker box. I'm going to group these. That's Command G, or Object Group. So now you can see that's grayed out because I grouped it. Now let's say I want 3 of these and I want them all perfectly spaced. 2, 3. All right, align it to our left in this case, looks pretty good. And this is going to distribute it towards that center. So I know these boxes, this space is going to be the same, and then this space is going to be the same. And let's say we're going to free transform it down. That way we can see the spacing a little bit more. You can, thanks to the grids, let me just grab one of these instead since I grouped those. If you have your guidelines, you can see how it's sort of like jumping all over the place. It does want to intersect with the top one there. Let's just chuck these out of the way. Let's get rid of these also. When we have our invisibles up, I'm just going to do this again since those were making it a little wonky. You can see it's showing us our intersects depending on which way we're going. So it's going to do them for all of them. So it's finding midpoint to midpoint. And this one's sort of setting up the distance so that when I make the next one, you can see what happens. We get that little space bar in between. Space bar in between. So this is the manual style of doing this. All right, let's go ahead. And I'm just going to bump that one up just a little bit. And you guessed it, it's going to find the midpoints, and I can just keep building from there. So this one's another way that you can do it. It's a little bit more manual. You're going to have a little bit more control over it, but you will be able to either do it by the align or by the distributes on that. So if you're looking to make patterns of some sort, this can be super useful and handy. And I am going to save this for later so that we can come back to it. So I've just grouped it, and I'm going to slide it off to the side. And zoom in. Not on that part. All right. Command 0, remember, is going to get you right back into your pane. All right, so the Pathfinder is one of those tools that's going to take your shapes, and it's going to allow you the flexibility of either uniting, dividing, or intersecting. So you can see each of these shape modes is going to change how you make your shapes. So if you wanted a specific shape, you could pen tool it. But what if it's like if you had a drawing class? So you know how they always say in drawing classes, you look at the objects and you break it down into the basic geometrics. Well, for building shapes, we're kind of doing the same thing in Illustrator, except we're using what they have. So we can go forth, and I'm just going to use this weird yellow. It does look like it shows up okay-ish on the screen. And let's say I want to make, for my poster, it has those little bullets that round on one side, but the other side is going to stay straight. But I'm like, okay, I could need to figure this out. So one option is, of course, our pen tool. I'll just pull this off. We could add a point. So this, I'm going to show two ways to do this shape building. We could add an anchor point and then do a convert. And I'm just going to pull the handle out just a little bit so that when I go to my direct select, it will give a curve. Okay, that's kind of what I was looking for, but what if I wanted something different? All right, so let's go with that rectangle tool again, and this time I know it's going to be a circle because I want a circular edge on this, and I'm going to hold down my shift key whenever I'm building it, and I go, okay, yeah, you know what, if these were together, and I'm just going to bump it up so the center points here sort of match up. If I'm building this, that outlines exactly how I want it, but I don't want this line on it, so what should I do? I'm just going to option slide it over because we're going to keep coming back to this one. Let's really put them in the pasteboard so we can see it. All right, so I want this shape, but I don't want this line. I'll select both, and it's this first one. It's going to unite them all together. So then if I was going to do a menu or tabs on the side, or if I'm doing, I had a student in one of my classes, they're doing a big top tent, so it looks like the little flaps. I mean, you could do the flaps then in this style and then just rotate it around. So we have the rectangle and we have that circle shape to it. So the unite is going to help us unify the two shapes. I'm going to say if it's a pen tool that you're trying to unite, so let's say we have the rectilinear shape and then something that was pen tooled, sometimes the unite does get grumpy whenever it's a compound shape like a pen tool. So it's just so many lines it doesn't quite know what to do with it. So when you're working with these, the geometrics do tend to work a little bit better with that because it's less confusing and complicated for it shape-wise. I'm going to duplicate it again, and we can see this next one when we hover over it says minus the front. All right, so if I was going to minus the fronts, what's going to happen is this is going to disappear, and we're going to get this cutout shape to it. All right, that looks interesting. Maybe we want that in our design. This looks like one of those little Post-it note flags. Or you can, same thing as the last time, duplicate, duplicate. You can make these nice patternings out of it. The next one is going to do the intersect between the two. So whenever, and this is what I keep, and a lot of people don't like the little pop-up hints. I do find in the earlier stage, if you're like, what's this do? It will give you that little description to it. So for this one, it's going to do the intersect. So all we're going to have is this shape. And I'm going to do it with this one, and then I'm going to do it with a slightly different one so you can see, like, maybe it would be handy for that one. So a good use is, let's say you're building a leaf or a petal or something like that that has a more organic shape to it. Wherever these, and I'm just going to change the colors so that we can see it, wherever these intersect, and I'm going to I'm going to multiply it just for demo's sake, and I'm going to align it to the top so I know these are perfectly right on. The intersection could, in this shape, be that leaf if I'm going to do. There's a class on Skillshare Aaron Draplin does where he makes a laurel, and in order to get that leaf shape of the laurel, so those are those little banner things that look like, it's like a stamp of certification, etc. So if you wanted to make a laurel, but you're like, well, I don't know how to do, pen tool this. Well, you don't have to. You just have to think, what would the intersections look like? And let's just duplicate it so it stays live. That intersection gives us that leaf design. So then, let's say, for example, then we can free transform this so it's on its side more, and we can make more of a natural pattern out of it. So slide that down. So if it was going to be a plant, this is going to get all sorts of crooked, but it's going to look like leaves going down. This is going to be more like in the pop style, sort of a quilty look to it. If I group each of these, so we're going to get this weird sort of vine-like pattern out of this. All we did was do the intersect, and I'm just going to do a left align so everything tucks back in and evens out. If you want to take it one extra step, you can do that distribute and just make sure everything's spaced out. You can get a more ornate patterning to your look with just one quick intersect. So if you're looking at something, you're like, how did they do, let's say there's multiple ones of these, and you're like, oh, I love these shapes. How did they do these? So we got this really weird pattern and 1, 2, 3, 4 basic duplicates. And all it did was start with this intersect. So if I see something complicated like this, I usually go, well, okay, we have a repeat pattern. Let's break it down. And then I see this shape. How could we get this shape? Oh, it's 2 circular intersections. And you can just sort of map it out from there. So it's a deconstruction to reconstruct it. So you can build something quite fancy from an intersect. So it's one of those things I always like to show just because it does have a lot of uses to that. Going back to our Pathfinder. Let's just stay with the circles. Why not? They were there. The next one is actually going to take that intersection and exclude it. I lovingly always call this the MasterCard because it looks like their logo, sort of. So you just have those 2 circles there, or whatever shapes. So if it was these shapes up here, whatever was at that intersection now does not exist. And the uses for that is now you can change, to whatever color. And because it's Pathfinder's converting it to a more complex shape, this shape building is going to allow you to change the colors instead of have to change everything individually. Let's just keep going. We'll use MasterCard wannabe. This one is going to just divide them, and you're like, nothing happened. Nothing's going to happen until you deselect, and I switched by using my A. So A is your direct select and B is your regular select. If you get really heavy into Illustrator, I'm going to recommend definitely getting used to using those 2 quick keys, because like this one, you're like, oh no, but it's moving everything and I just want to select it individually. Deselect, go to A, get that direct select, and now what's nice with this is each one of these, you're going to be able to change the colors for them. Let's go weird green. Well, that's a really weird green. This is nice so that you can have, different colors for each of the spaces that you've subdivided. You can also, with your direct select, slide them apart. So maybe you're just like, no, you know what, I just really wanted these 2, but in order to get to it, I had to sort of get that out of the way. And you can just go delete, and it's totally gone. And when you reselect it, it knows what it's doing. Something to be aware of, what's happened, you can see over in our fill, it has question marks. If we go to our direct select, you're going to see it knows what color it is, but when we go to our regular select, it's like, I don't know what you're doing right now. So with that, you can just sort of ignore that because you know it's a complex shape. But what happens if you're like, well, I don't actually want a stroke around it? Well, you could pop that stroke on the top and just change it to none. And now you have a form that isn't relying on a linear perspective, so you don't have to have that stroke on there. But your fill, because it's going to still be grouped as a unit, it's just going to have question marks behind it. It's okay. It's just saying more than one thing's happening in this color. Are you okay with it? You can see this one, since I didn't have a color shift, it's still saying green. Same dealio. I click on the stroke, I can get it to none. Now I don't have an outline on that. Or if you wanted that outline, go for it. And then with our stroke, you can make it all sorts of crazy. And maybe for this, I would put the line more on the outside just to see what happens. So just by changing the stroke and by changing it to the outside, you can see we have a totally different shape built already. So if we wanted to use this in our work, or what if it's on the inside? Different. In the middle, you're going to get that sort of intersecting disc. Our corners, you can round them, and you can also angle them. Each one of those are going to give a different appearance. So one of the maddening things, as we said, is these programs do end up doing a lot, but these are the things that I like to, in the early stages with people, and even myself, just goof off with it and see what happens to it. Create a new document and just build shapes for 20 minutes or whatever, and just see what all you can make with that. Where's our next one? I lost my positioning. All right, let's go ahead, slide this one up. We'll come back to this one. This one, and some of them are going to warn you, like towards when we get to the end, the shapes that I have, they're going to be super situational for these. So you might end up only using like, man, I love the unite. I like the minus front. This divide's amazing. And your whole career, those are the three that you're like, they're the ones I'm using. So you might not ever float down here because these are more situational. This one is going to trim it. So this almost looks like the unite, but you can still see the shapes within that. You can pull them apart just like we did within the divide. So there's sort of multiple uses for these. All right, let me get myself back to where we were. All right, so we had the trim. We're going to have a merge. That, for this shape, functions very similarly to that unite. This one is going to crop it. So there is something that we're going to get you called the clipping mask, so you can actually mask things out. So think of it sort of like that. This one is just going to give you an outline form of whatever you have shape-wise built. And doing a backtrack, this one's just going to minus the back. So this one minus the front, and then this one's going to minus the back. So you can sort of shift between those two. But your Pathfinder tool is going to take whatever you have for your shapes, excluding that solar flare. We know the solar flare is weird, but all of these, you can start building more complex forms by just using, like in this case, the rectangle and a circle. So maybe, you know, even for something like these down here, I'm going to pick on these that we made. What if, for whatever reason, I want a star that's going to be cut out? Okay, so for that, you go, okay, so I just built that on top. Let's minus that front. You can keep going. So you can keep building up upon these so that if, you know, this is going to be more of a die cut look. And like I said, that guy who's doing the circus tent, oops, make sure you're on the fill if you're changing your fill. I'm going to shift control. I'm on the PC right now, or it's going to be shift command if you're on a Mac. Left bracket, that sends everything to the back. Shift control or command, right bracket brings everything to the front. That way you can sort of see what that star punch out would look like. If you want the menus for that, that is object arrange, bring to front, send to back. So that's the extremes of those. Oops, my mouse moved. You can also bring forward. I have a lot of layers. You're not going to be able to see it. And that's sort of like, think of them as index cards in a line, front, back, and forward. It's just going to keep working its way layer by layer through your design. Problem is, this was one of my earlier shapes, so it's going to go through every forward that I've had. So if you just wanted it back one, you know, you're going to have to somewhat plan accordingly with that. The ones you're going to use the most is forward and backward. That way you can sort of push-pull whatever it is you're designing. One more thing I wanted to cover today, and I sort of did it down here without really going further into it because I knew I was going to, was our different transparencies. And by default, just like in Photoshop, our layers, so think of those layer styles, is always going to be set to normal. Transparency in Illustrator sort of merges layer style plus actual transparency. So that if I were to take these and turn off that multiply, and we'll talk about what that is in a second, you could change just the transparency of one. So this is that opacity, and it's at 100%. So you can fade these out just a little bit. I think that's one of the things that's tricky with Illustrator right off the bat, is because we're used to Photoshop where everything's like, ooh, it's all painterly and soft and fuzzy. And then you come to Illustrator, it's like hard edge, straight lines. It's a little harder to get used to, like, but if I want something softer, how do I do that? One of the ways is your transparency. So you can play around with this. This one could be transparent. Also, let's just take it down so that if something crazy was happening in the background, red, why not? Whenever I push that to the back, and this stays the 100%, the star, and these have the opacities down, you get this really interesting interaction with these. So they're all sort of, the blue's talking to the yellow, which is also talking to this overlap of the orange. So you can get some softness to it. Let's just turn the stroke off so that you can see it. Sometimes the stroke is what throws us in the early stages, because it's like, but I want this to be nice and soft and airy, but it doesn't look it. So when I draw, I tend to keep the lines on it, but if it's something that's not going to be outlined, then I turn those strokes off at the end. I just make the fill as none. Then that way I can have a little bit more fluidity behind it. But let's pretend. And so you can see it's like, I have no idea what you're doing, because I've also selected this one. We just dial them right back up to 100, and we're back to normal. If we were to select the blue one, okay, you can darken it. And in Photoshop, it gives us the preview. I think I'm in 2019 yet. Oh, let's just close every document. I think I did, didn't I? Yeah, I did. I think I'm still in 2019. I need to update this. But you should be able to see a preview for each. Now, what I tell people with either, if you're in Photoshop and it's layer styles, or here and it's transparency modes, you're not going to remember all of them. You're probably going to remember your favorite 2 or 3. I use multiply all the time, overlay a lot, and screen a lot. So each of these, you're going to be like, I have my favorites. I know where I'm going with these. Color burn, lighten, so it's just going to brighten everything that's underneath of that. Screen looks similar in this case. If you're in Photoshop, screen, if you have 2 images, it's going to make it a lot brighter, whatever's on top. Color dodge, overlay, I'm not going to go through each of these, but you get the idea. It's going to pop through each of these. And it's kind of interesting, because then if what happens if we're going to color dodge this one, or we're going to use hue, and it's going to pop that one through. Each of those shapes are going to keep interacting with whatever's underneath. So this one, so think of this as like a photo, and I'm just going to pretend it's like Photoshop. And then each of these is like a negative or a transparency, and a negative transparency. So the negatives would keep stacking on top of it. If you remember old overhead projectors, and they used that clear acetate film, and you would draw on it, that's that first copy, and then I put another acetate and draw on top of it. That's the second one. So you can see both things through it. So it's essentially like working with a clear, because these are colors, acetate. Whatever's underneath is going to be interacting with it. I've also popped up my library, because I think this will make a little bit more sense once you see it with something that's a little bit more pictorial rather than shape to shape and like plain color. I fill my patterns, the brushes, etc. with that Adobe Capture app. I can't remember if I talked about that yet or not. Capture is a free app with your Creative Cloud. You can photograph things, get color swatches. So here's some of my swatches that I have narrowed down. You can actually build gradients there. You can build different graphics that you're going to use. Brushes, that's going to be like, you can use it for brushes here or brushes in Photoshop. But I deal a lot with patterning. So let's say I'm going to use this pattern, and it acts like a fill. So this is actually through that app, and I'm going to, I don't know, make a circle, and I'm going to put this pattern on it. Or let's go with the blue so we have a little bit more contrast. With those transparency styles. I'm going to pick on my friend Multiply because I do use that one the most. What ends up happening is the two layers start talking to each other, just like our colors did. So maybe I want to screen some of that and get this really weird sort of pattern there. Or soft light, and you can see wherever it was brighter, it's going to go in those little nooks and crannies, or it's going to exclude whatever color interaction we have. This is great for like poster designs or, trying to get some sort of difference to it. Let's put our yellow and bring it on top. And our yellow is with hue. Now all three are starting to talk. You guessed it, I'm bringing the blue one over. And this one was under soft light. So you're getting all these weird, crazy interactions just by changing the transparency style to it. So you can have a lot of fun with this. It's going to help the imagery sort of bounce off. And I see this a lot with, let's say we're doing a book cover design. And we have a crazy background like this. And you're like, ooh, how do I get my type to look good in it? And our default gut reaction is, let's put a drop shadow on it. Okay, maybe. And I'm laughing because I see this. I've seen this for 20 years. That's like the default. Like, I don't know what to do, drop shadow it. But what if instead, let's just pick on these. Let's say this is my book cover. Instead, what happens if I choose, I'm doing this stroke again. Let's flip those, and then I'm going to turn my line off. Let's say, like, okay, but I could put my type on this box. But this looks like I was just like, I don't know what to do, and putting a box. So what happens if I start popping through each of these and I go, which one is going to help my text? Ooh, still have something interesting happening, but I'm going to be able to read my text a little bit easier. What happens if it's more of a green? What happens if it's more of a blue? So you can sort of have the flexibility of each of these, but make it a little bit more interesting than it's not even, I'm going to call it default. It's like the default gut reaction of just dropping a drop shadow on it. This is a more interesting design solution than a default. I'm just going to put a drop shadow, or let's just pick on it because another one that we do a lot. I'm just going to put cover because it's the cover of our book, and I'm going to not use. Yeah, let's use this one. Why not? And let's say for whatever reason, I want it to make it more of the red, and that's why we're having a problem with it because we're getting lost over there. Another thing that ends up coming up as like a default as a design solution is I'm just going to put an outline around it. And that's fine. It has its uses. But what happens if you can instead, I would probably darken that red a little bit more, use more of the burgundy. But what happens if you use something that's more interesting of a design solution than the two that might be the first ones people go to? So I always like to show the transparencies for that reason. You don't even have to, so I put a layer style on this, but I don't even have to use it to its full intensity. Even just that nice subtle shift feels like I'm going to be able to read this a little bit better. Let's just pick more of a burgundy just so we can see. So we can read it, we can understand it, and we didn't use the two gut instincts of how do I make this a little bit more legible. So something, if you wish to experiment, I'll just zoom out so we can see all of our craziness from the day. What happens if you start shape building? What happens if you use these shape modes? And then also, how does the transparencies and their styles work for whatever it is you're working on? So if you see a complicated pattern out in the wild, first off, what I recommend, if you have your cell phone on you, snapshot it so that you can come back later and look at it and be like, how could I make something that looks like X, Y, or Z? What shapes, or using our shape buildings, what are the intersections? How could we make that weird pattern right off the bat? So you don't have to, depend on either just drawing it or having this weird wonky, and I'm not saying it would be wonky, pen tool, but what happens if you can simplify it even further? I like what Draplin says. He says something to the extent of, design shouldn't be ultimately hard. How can you simplify it to make that shape be built a little bit faster? So all it is just looking at it and judging what tools would I use? Would it be a unite? Would it be a minus front? Is it a divide? Is it that intersect? Which one would make that shape easiest, and then how could you replicate it? So maybe start including some of these into whatever it is you're working on to see how this can help and benefit your process. And if you have right now nothing that this would relate to, just make a page and have a lot of fun with this. I mean, just looking at this weird little sort of fortune cookie crescent moon thing, just by changing those strokes just that little bit, each one of these are going to have such a different visual, and I'll just pop this up so we can see it, such a different visual output. You know, what happens if it's rounded instead? You know, what happens if it's on the inside? This is a totally different shape. So what can these all do, and then what from last time can we add to it? So our strokes, our colors, etc. So I hope you have a lovely weekend. Next time I'm going to do another, deep dive into Illustrator, because I do think Illustrator is one of those programs where you're like, how do I do this? So we'll spend a little bit more time with our pen tool, because I know pen tool is usually where the problems do arise, because it isn't as intuitive as maybe building a shape. So I like to start you guys off with shapes, just getting used to it from building it from there, and then we can pop into the pen tool. So for this week, have fun with this, experiment, play, etc. And since it's Friday, I hope everyone has a lovely Friday also, and a weekend, doing whatever it is you do on the weekends. All right. I hope you have a great day. I hope this mic was better. I'm keeping experimenting. I had a mic like 2 years ago that was amazing, and then I unplugged it and I rolled over it with my desk chair. So one, don't do that, and two, it's been a quest just to find a good replacement for that. So I hope it worked. We're getting closer, if anything. All right, thanks for coming, and have a great weekend. I'll see you that next time. Bye.